Thank you so much. So we all know that great events can't happen without great AV, and the panel here represents different perspectives on how that all comes together. I thought it was really fascinating to learn this morning that AVEC is going to have a report on the live event sector in 2019. I think it's super exciting and much needed research, and goes to show the potential for AV at live events. And so we're going to talk about some big picture ideas. We're going to talk about some current trends and all the exciting projects that everyone is working on now. Andy, let's start with you. Tell us about a big recent event and what was technically challenging about it.
That's a good question. So we've done a variety. So MoMA Factory is a very large experiential multimedia design firm. We work in everything from concerts and touring experiences to permanent installations. Our two latest pieces that have come out, and we often have to white label them for theme parks, are the nighttime lights at Hogwarts Castle, the projection mapping on the side of Hogwarts Castle and all of the Universal Studios parks, and then also the DreamWorks Theater featuring Kung Fu Panda. That one's at the Hollywood Universal Studios. For us, one of the main technical challenges is ensuring that the strategy for the technical specifications match what the end experience is meant to be. We have a lot of people that go in and say, man, I want the nicest quality, 0.000 millimeter pitch LED, and that's amazing. It's going to be 4 miles away, and it can use, it has to run on a 9-volt battery. So a lot of the work that we do is working with AV integrators to establish the most practical experience possible from the end user experience. What is the resolution that you need to have somebody experience an emotion? It doesn't have to be super, super high end all the time. We like to make more of an artistic approach of knowing what the pros and cons are of the technical, and then actually designing the experience around that canvas. Mm-hmm.
And Tati, I would love for you to explain to everybody what our tech house is. We saw a little bit in the video teaser. What is it? And you're in DC, but you're about to open up Miami. What's happening?
Our tech house is a new innovative art space dedicated to showcasing the works of the artists who are creating with the new medium. We are, I would say, the first of a kind in the sense that we don't only create a showcase platform for artists, but we work with them hand in hand to make sure that their work goes beyond just their screens and is created in an exhibit format where people can come, they can explore, they can interact with it. The Miami location that is due to open in a month or maybe even less, we're shooting for the Art Basel. Will showcase, it will open with a traveling exhibit by French artists. It was one of the first exhibit installations that was created using the light technology and interactivity when the Kinets just first came out many years ago. It's been on the road for about 7 years, and now it's in the US, so we're touring it. Our mission is to educate public more about the creative possibilities that entail the arts and technology, and something that they can get closer to, they can learn more about, as well as to empower the artists who are working with those tools right now and inspire the new generation about this new medium, which is so relevant for today. Our tech house location in Washington, D.C. was our headquarters. We opened it last June, and since then we already had about 10 experiences that we presented. Some of them were exhibits, some of them were more seasonal installations. Now we're in a turn where every 3 months or so we showcase different exhibits. The current one that we saw a preview of is a new nature. It's a highly interactive exhibit, the first one, I would say, to the level of interactivity that we have for a few reasons. It uses machine learning, which is very new to the exhibits. Typically, the exhibits are just more of a graphical, and this is machine learning where the creatures evolve as visitors interact with them. It uses real-time generated graphics. So everything changes and everything reacts. And then It's an immersive, a fully immersive experience and fully interactive one on a 3D level, and not just 2D, where visitors are able to almost immerse themselves inside the installations and interact with them.
So interesting. Brad, you have a lot on your plate as well right now. Feld Entertainment is responsible for Disney on Ice, Sesame Street Live, and coming soon, as in like any day now, Trolls the Experience. So tell everybody what that is and how that experience is so AV fueled.
Well, it's an interactive Trolls museum almost, just the experiences for kids and their families to walk through and be part of the film world. It opens next Wednesday in New York. We soft opened about 2 weeks ago after starting the production process in March, which was quite compressed, to say the least. But our AV integration in that has become worked hand in hand with what would traditionally be a largely scenic experiment. And the AV integration has to do with interactive sound installations, a 3D video experience that they can go through, a lot of touch and interactive cause and effect things that kids can easily relate to in the experience and just have fun. So it's a good experiment in how to hide the technology but just deliver the experience without anyone realizing that there's technology behind it.
Mm-hmm. And it's a short-term project, right?
Yeah, it's an installation, but we're slated right now to run through most of 2019. We had already announced an extension before we opened, fortunately, but it's currently then slated to run through all of 2019 in New York on 57th Street.
Great. And Colleen, you have a completely different perspective. Yeah. You often are the client. So at Morgan Stanley, you are vice president and event producer. Although you know what it's like on the other side, you have a background in theater,
yes,
and live events. So tell me what are your needs at Morgan Stanley? What kind of events are you planning, and what do you look for from AV providers?
Okay. Great. So I'm the lead event producer for Morgan Stanley's wealth management business, and the majority of our events are financial advisor and manager training. Occasionally, I work on some client-facing events as well. And almost all of my events take place in a room just like this, or the plenary room in a hotel. But we often do more complex things such as expos and live concerts as a part of our events as well. So my needs tend to be more on the logistical side, like arranging the screens and the audio, as doing the staffing as well as the budgeting for the technical sides of our events. Nothing quite as exciting as the three of these folks do, but we do it in great quantity at Morgan Stanley.
Mm-hmm. Well, so how does your background in theater inform how you think about these things?
Because I started out as a production manager in theater, which is a much more creative field, I tend to try to approach our events from a perspective of not just how many screens do we need, what kind of audio system are we going to have, but what can we do to make it a good experience both for the presenters and for the attendees? How can we keep their attention and make it new and innovative through technology?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm really curious about how the creative works. Are you partners, truly partners on these events? Are you just suppliers? Not just suppliers, but are you? I mean, what are they calling on you to do? Who does the creative? How does that work? Andy, why don't you kick us off with that?
It really runs the gamut of it. You know, sometimes you have clients that know exactly what they want, and you know, we actually might come into conflict because they're really pushing for their creative vision, and we know it might not work. So in which case we're trying to pull a little judo and you know, have them refine their creative. But for the most part, what we're finding is we're living at a time where clients really don't know what they want, and there's not a lot of people that know how to sell them the full experience. To the point where, you know, a lot of the first touch people that we have of advertising agencies or architects, the people that you'd think are there for the creative, we have a lot of problems actually having this come to life because they don't know how to sell it to the end client. So we find a much more success in partnering with those firms. We don't have architectural services, so that needs to be part of the package, the collaborative effort. But a lot of it is working with them to determine what they think that they want. And and listening to this morning's events, when people are saying, "Oh, we want voice and we want AR," I really find those to be the fad trend terms, and nobody understands what that actually means. What's the end emotion? What's the aftertaste of the experience that you want people to take away from it? And then we'll build the technology and the architecture and the experience and the design and all the the nuance around it with that. So it is a lot of trying to digest what that initial core is and then develop something out completely around it with budget and schedule limitations as well.
Mm-hmm. Tati, what's that like for you? Because not only do you have the exhibits, but you've worked on events. You've worked with Google, for instance, at the Kennedy Center, with an event with the Kennedy Center, the By the People Festival. So
yeah.
Tell us about those interactions.
Well, I think it was natural to us to be able to offer our space for events, considering that we do have a 270-degree projection, which would allow us to create custom content and create a truly immersive environment, whether it's for brand launches or we've had a book launch also done. Additionally, we've experienced receiving a lot of random requests on things that people would expect us, I suppose, to be able to do. We do have a production team on hand that assists the artists, but the clients always, I would agree with Andy that they want something, they can't really define what they want, and they assume that you can help them with that, and usually it's on a very short turnarounds. I think the most difficult has been, we've had few wonderful festivals that we were not able to take part in, such as the Atlantic Festival, in the sense that we would get a 3-week inquiry about being able to do, I think, an interactive photo booth for them, and that's not at the core of our mission of things to do, and we try to facilitate those things sometimes, but they don't work out. Something that we've been successful at is trying, I think, to be informative when we discuss with the clients of what we are able to do, what we're not. That's something that we've been improving on. Trying for them to understand the complexity of things that go into, and that it's not possible without getting as much details from them and without putting in a work to be able to present them with a sample and be able to test things. I think the difficult one was recently we had someone walking in and trying to see, oh, can we use your projection system as a PowerPoint and be able to click through slides? And it's a little more sophisticated. It's possible to build features like that in, but they take time, and you can't just have them for a presentation ready tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's just like having a better understanding of what things mean, what do they require. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hearing all the time from producers, timelines are shrinking. I'm seeing nodding heads. So, well, Colleen, we'll put this on you. Tell us how you approach that. What lead time do you have? When do you bring in the AV partners? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have internal clients at Morgan Stanley, so I'm both the client to the AV company as well as having to deal with my own clients. So my clients will come to me and say, we want this amazing thing in 3 weeks. We don't know what it is. Much like your 9-volt battery, they have $4. So because we're in a highly regulated financial field, we very often cannot execute anything that's exciting and new with $4 in 3 weeks. But going back to the timelines, I have a wide range of when I will involve an AV vendor or a production company. Right now, I have events that I'm working on through the end of 2019 that have already been bid out. And I have started budgets for that and have started the internal process at Morgan Stanley for getting that money approved. I also get calls 4 weeks beforehand for smaller events that may be happening. Most recently, there was one in North Carolina where it was a general session and 2 breakouts. And so when I have the long timeline, I can really look for the absolute best AV provider for the space and the money. Then when I have the shorter timelines, I have to see who's in North Carolina and who has availability. So it is a huge range.
What drives that?
It's a lot of things. With Morgan Stanley or with any industry, when the industry is doing better, they can put more money into training or client-facing events. And sometimes it's that the business unit may have known about it for quite some time but didn't engage us until 4 weeks before. And sometimes it's just that a unique opportunity to do an event came up very last minute.
What was the timeline for making Trolls a reality?
We got the green light in March, which we would hope for like a 2-year process.
I would say this
Okay.
is lucky.
We got 8 months.
A March.
And it's a little different at Feld because we are the client and the integrator. We have a set of producers, the Feld family, that say we want to do this, we want to hit this number, make it happen. And then we internally are the creative team and the executing team. The timeline we found, you say anything in entertainment, you get to pick 3: fast, good, or cheap. Mm-hmm. But you get to pick 2 of those 3. Fast was already picked on this particular project, so good and cheap became a pretty easy one to balance when we were signing a large-scale deal with NBC Universal to do multiple, across multiple IPs. So the timeline, I think, in a lot of ways, made it a little bit easier for us because there wasn't the sometimes corporate drag with a lot of decision making because they had to be made, things had to be built now, and then they had to be delivered on time because we had a hard start date. So I actually kind of enjoyed the compressed time frame, even though that added a little bit of extra stress, but from a design perspective, it actually helped things along a little bit because there wasn't as much back and forth that you could do, or we would just crash and burn.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Andy, how long do you have to work on projects, and how does that timeline determine for you whether you're going to accept that business or not?
That was a big key strategic conversation we had at the factory over the last year because it really ranges. Large-scale infrastructural projects, which are permanent projects in places where media is not normally placed, like airports and bridges and train stations and things. Those are typically 1 to 3 years of just talking, and then another 3 to 5 years of actual production time, with the last month being typical AV integrator, dust-free, go in and install. So those are very, very large projects. On the flip side of that, when we did the fun performance for the Grammys, they actually called us, I believe it was 3 weeks before the Grammys were started for a completely designed, broadcast-ready show. So our teams work at very different paces at different times, and luckily we're large enough that people love to work on some projects for a very long time, your typical 9 to 5 day, or they're artists, so they work 12 to 12. And then you have others that you do whatever you can, and it just has to work once, so just make sure it's possible and stay up all night for 3 weeks to get it done.
And you do that, why would you do that? Is it just because the Grammys are so high profile, you don't want to turn that business down?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. The main is because we're artists and we're a production studio. So our job is to make beautiful things and to make them happen. A lot of the decisions in the factory have been focused on, how do we build the team to best serve our clients, but those clients don't really know what they want, and they call you at all different timelines and budgets and creative scopes, and how can we have the skill set to resolve that?
Mm-hmm. So we've talked about budget a little bit, but let's dig into it. I'm curious, where does AV fall in a typical event budget? Is it the largest? Is it the second largest, maybe after venue? Where is it falling? And what portion of a typical event budget does the AV take? Give that to you.
So for a corporate event put on by Morgan Stanley, there's a huge range of what percentage of our budget will be for AV and production. It's very much based on location For example, doing an event at the Ziegfeld Ballroom in New York or Cipriani or some venue like that is going to cost a whole lot more than doing an event at the Grand Hyatt in Tampa, just by nature of location. Or likewise, it's going to cost, an event at the Grand Hyatt in Tampa is going to cost much less than an event at the Grand Hyatt in New York, which is a union property. So it ranges between 10% and 40% just based on location, number of attendees, and what the scope is.
Mm-hmm. What's the trend? Is it shrinking? Is it growing?
For me, it's growing, and for many reasons, including the iPads that are in front of you, which are provided by a company called Concise and are coming to be used at many more of our events, and there's a cost associated with that, as well as different portions of Morgan Stanley's business wanting to display their own technology at our events. So due to the increase in scope, our AV budget is increasing year over year.
Mm-hmm. When you're working with clients, like, do people understand what they're buying, and how do you educate them? Maybe Tati, have you encountered that with clients that you've worked on at different events?
I think we've been very selective as to what events we do at Arctic House. I mean, events are an interesting avenue for us to explore, but earlier on, I think after a few months of being open, we've made a decision for ourselves that our focus is definitely on presenting exhibitions, just because it's really hard to match certain expectations of people, what they can have in the space, and it becomes a really a difficult task for the production team to figure out. We have one production team, so like Candy was saying, you know, it really depends on who can take on those last minute events, or even if they're long term. So for our sake, we had to save the sanity of our production team, so we've really limited to things that we want to work with, which allowed us to do a lot of great things, like working, when you mentioned, for the Kennedy Center honors with the Google Culture, working with Bank of America on the All-Star Games, presenting for the Bertelsmann Foundation their book about the workforce and technology, and really creating a digital overview of that book. So those are exciting projects that we're able to select and take on. Mm-hmm. But as far as expectations, I think an important element to us is to make sure that the client trusts us, because a lot of weight is in our hands in the way that we are able to present their vision or to interpret it, and having that trust is the most important thing. If we're able to build it, then we definitely move with the project. If we feel that we're not getting anywhere, I think it's more of a time efficiency, that maybe it's not what we have time to work for, or maybe it's not the match.
Mm-hmm. We have a question that popped in from the audience, so thank you for that. Colleen, what are your most important criteria when selecting an AV supplier? Do you typically use a small handful of suppliers nationally or internationally, or do you rely on a greater quantity of local or regional suppliers, and why?
So there's been a shift recently, and at Morgan Stanley we now rely on a small selected pool of vendors, though we're always looking to expand that pool. And the reason is purely from a logistical perspective. There are a lot of steps in order to become an approved vendor with Morgan Stanley, and so it's not realistic for us to be able to use a different vendor on each event. And as such, we work really hard with our selected group of vendors to make sure that they are relatively interchangeable as long as we have enough time. However, there are certain vendors that are just better at certain events for us, and as long as they're available and their quote fits within our budget and is level with the industry standard, we will be able to work with them.
Great. Let's shift gears to one of these bigger picture topics, and this is the idea of personalization at events, immersiveness. It's a trend that we're seeing, whether it's personalization through AV, or it can be through the catering, or it can be through gifting in the world of live events. But when it comes to AV, how can you make this experience responsive to individuals? And Brad, I think you've experimented a little bit with this with some of your touring shows.
Sure. It's for us, it's about keeping our target demo, which is 4 to 11-year-olds, engaged for 90 minutes. And how do we do that? And not only keep them engaged, but keep their parents, who are the ones buying the ticket and then going out in the lobby and buying every toy possible for the kid, how do we keep them entertained as well? We've experimented with a few things. Some of them have been successful. Among the most successful are utilizing some pretty simple technology, just with a basic Bluetooth generator. Kids can put on a wristband, and when we send them the signal, then they are part of, helping Iron Man and Marvel Universe Live defeat Loki. And that gives the kids a direct engagement in the story, and gives them raises their stakes a little bit, which makes it a more impactful event for them. It can be as simple as bringing the show out, breaking the fourth wall, bringing the show out into the audience. And then when we've gone into the Trolls world, more experiential, those positive experiments we found to really be helpful in not only just showcasing something for the kids to be in, but giving them a stake in making them part of the experience. And that makes for a longer term engagement with the family. Something that we hope they'll come back to all of our other properties. They start to brand us as an experiential deliverer of this type of entertainment that they really want.
Mm-hmm. Andy, how are you addressing that concept? Is that something that people are interested in, creating these events that people can participate in the experience rather than just passively consume it?
So we have a balance for it. Our number one requirement, and it's our motto, Moment Factory's motto is we do it in public. We only work on experiences that are social and location-based. We won't do websites or content on the screen or things like that. And then there's a balance between asking people to lean forward and engage themselves, or can they sit back and just have a screen tell them something. So for number one, me as a storyteller up here on stage, I can only speak to one person at a time. I'm either looking at you or I'm not looking at you, but this is a one-on-one experience. But you also have people next to you that are also part of that social experience. So how much I personalize it to you also excludes the other people that are around you. So what we're trying to do is actually make everyone in your space interact with each other and with us. And then with that, require for interactivity with me, we use interactivity to develop empathy. So if you're going to ask somebody to everybody stand up in the room, well, what's the payoff? What's the reward for the effort that you're having to make to interact with me? If it's just stand up, sit down, you're going to say, wow, that was horrible. I'm never going to come back here again. So it really is what's the payoff for asking for that interactivity or the true personalization? Because I can just look at you and it's personalized.
Interesting. We have another question from the audience that I wanted to share. Do you find clients focus more on event production versus experiential design because they don't know how to explain experiential design to their boss? Who wants to take that on? Do people know what it is and how do they explain it?
So everybody right now is being told that they're brand storytellers. Oh, you're representing your brand. You are the brand storyteller of every company you've ever worked for, and no one has any idea what that means. So, traditionally you have advertising agencies that sit there and they come up with, Don Draper taglines of what the brand is. But now we're not in a broadcast. So, you're not screaming something at a TV set. Now it's digital, it's interactive. I can find out what your thoughts are by you guys pressing your buttons on your iPads, and I can respond to that. So the idea of event production, I would say particularly in events as kind of Napster and LimeWire and everything wiped out the music industry in the early 2000-ish. What do you say, aughts? I don't know. I've never known how to say that. People started realizing that events and touring and that's where music is making its money now, and there's a level of authenticity because it's people, it's not just audiovisual. But now if you just go to the same old concert and you see the same old guy in a goalposts with the standard stock lighting, and it's kind of boring. They say, oh, I saw that guy perform 5 years ago. It's going to be the same show. Now event production is for the next experience. They've bought that ticket. They say, wow, that was an awesome time. I'm going to come back and do it. I'm going to re-engage in that. This isn't something that I can press replay on YouTube on. It's about the experience for it, and that's where it's less scary than saying I represent the voice of my entire company in experience design. Now I'm just doing a small event.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think with branding, I see an experience in terms of being a brand representative, because on the surface with Feld, our brands are bigger names like Disney on Ice and Sesame Street Live or Marvel Universe. Those aren't actually our brands. Mm-hmm. Those are just a vehicle for our brands. And just to speak to your point, if you understand what the brand is, and our brand is family entertainment and a family experience that you remember, that's as simple as our brand is. And then we just use these different vehicles to get to that brand. And I think people get hung up on thinking that technology is part of a brand.
Yep.
And it's just a tool for that brand, or for any brand, if you want to use it for any type of story. That's what we get hung up on a lot, that I think everyone gets hung up a lot, like new shiny bells and whistles in technology. Oh, we have to use this. Mm-hmm. We have to use it, it's so cool. But is it going to help you further your brand? Is it going to help you tell your story?
Yeah, well, let's talk about one of those shiny bells and whistles, which is VR, AR, all of that mixed reality. Tati, I'm wondering, was using some of that the plan from the beginning? You have something really interesting, scavenger hunts that use them. So maybe the AR art hunt and scavenger hunt that I was looking at, those kind of experiences. How do you approach them? What do you think? Is it going to be the future for you?
Well, we find that I guess there are two reasons why we're exploring AR. One is that we really try to find a different use for people for their phones than taking the Instagram photos or selfies. When we talk about engagement and participation, which was talking about here earlier, one of the key components of Arctic House is where the technology steps in, is to facilitate participation and creation of that experience and being part of it and making it communal, where we can interact with things but also interact among it ourselves. Where the AR stepped in for us is that it was a way for people to use their phones to discover new things. This summer we partnered with a By the People International Festival in Washington, D.C., where we did an artist call for artworks that we were then able to adapt into the mobile application for people to go and hunt for those artworks around. They would find them at the Smithsonian's, at the Washington Memorial, National Cathedral, and other places. The difficulty when it comes to that is, one, the hardware and devices are not ready for a lot of things that we're trying to do, and you have a lot of users who are unhappy because their device is not updated, or their device cannot handle something, or they can't download the upgrade, or for whatever reasons. And then the two is that there's still not, it's really difficult, especially on our end, to work with artists and creatives because their work needs a lot of additional work to get adopted into the mobile platform. I think we are the first in the US, the Arctic House is the first in the US augmented reality cocktail bar, and we change our experiences with each exhibit to expand them. But the augmented reality art hunt, it just blew up our app pretty much just because those 5 installations were taking over it so much and making it a huge download. I think it was maybe even bigger than Facebook or whatever the app, the largest app you have on your phone. So there are a lot of things that we're facing, or why we're trying to use it is because we want people to be able to do things with their phones. We want them to be able to do other things. And it's enjoyable. It's something to educate them about possibilities of these things, but it's also to be able to educate them to have them the right expectations, because it's a very new field. Mm-hmm. A lot of things are still being worked out for it. I think it's exciting to see where it will take us. I prefer AR more to VR. I feel that VR separates us and creates individual experiences, whereas AR allows us to have experiences together and be able to, through augmentation. We've also explored VR. We had the first exhibit running for 3 months with virtual reality as a large component of it. Something that we're always facing the issues is that it has to run 7 days a week for 14 hours continuously. And that's a really great test for technology. And for people constantly using it, whether they're pulling on the headphones and breaking them, VR headphones, not knowing how to adjust them, or just the actual kind of work in. So a lot of things that are happening at Arctic House, I would say it's a great test ground for a lot of technology in the sense of, well, how is it going to work for a longer period of time, and how people interact with it.
Right. Andy, I know you have some thoughts on this topic. VR, AR, are you into it?
So I've for not in my current role, but in my previous studio, have produced a couple of VR apps, a couple for San Diego Comic-Con, a couple for actually did Google's first cardboard app for them. It was a release of their retail store, which the entire thing was supposed to be a tour of the new space that was going to be in London. That space wasn't built yet, so we built a virtual retail store, and it was an app for journalists to be able to visualize what the retail space would be. And VR as a previs tool, a pre-visualization tool, I think is very cool, and we actually do use it. It is not, we talk about things being bleeding edge, cutting edge, and then production ready. So bleeding edge is, that first prototype that comes out, it's going to break the second that you try it out. You never want to put more than, a couple of kids to play around with it. Cutting edge, you're starting to get better. It's the newest product, but it might not have the support system to have it up and running for 14 hours a day. And then we have production ready, which is our tried and true products that everybody has in the catalog, and we try to sell them so much. So that works on both the technical side and a creative side. Particularly for VR and for AR, the artists that work on these media are still trying to figure out what they're doing. It's not breaking the fourth wall. It's not breaking a 69 screen. You become a first cylinder. You're a first person cylinder into space. The entire creative experience of what that is not known yet, and it's going to take a while to get there. So yes, some of our projects have to feature that to further develop the industry for it. But technically speaking, we consider the 3D for film. 90% of people can see 3D. 10% of the population can't see it. Their brains either don't compute it, or they might have visual problems, or handicap to it, or some feature. Sometimes their brains just don't compute that way. In order for VR and AR to be 90% saturated and everybody sees things the way that you want VR to see, you need a 12K image at 120 frames per second with less than 3 microseconds of lag. Anybody that works in LEDs knows that a 12K image, that's big. 120 frames per second, that's 4 times what we normally produce at. So the cost to have that actually produced is going to be astronomical, not to mention the fact that this is the first time doing it. So yes, we have to get there creatively and further it, but the technology is just not there yet, and it's probably going to be ready in 6 months. I mean, stuff's moving so fast, but well, maybe 5 years. But we're at the balancing point of when to push it and when to say, you know what, you want to augment the wall? I can set up a projector and do the exact same thing that a pair of $7,000 glasses will be. That's for one person. So there's other ways of making experiences than just saying that I'm going to use this one technology. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Brad, you do 3D. What about VR, AR?
We did a 3D video wall on Trolls that's largely successful in terms of how the media is being implemented and how the experience works. The one thing I've noticed is that a 4-year-old doesn't want to wear glasses if they don't want to wear glasses. And they just don't care. They want to dance to the music that's playing along with it. In terms of AR and VR for the target audience that I'm focusing in, there's a lot of things that need to be worked out. VR has not been, there's a lot of evidence that shows that VR is not a good thing for children. clicks within their brain in the wrong way and can instantly make them addicted to it, and they'll walk off the edge of the stage because they don't have the spatial awareness that an adult has. So I don't think it's there for a large scale just yet. Also, the cost to implement it on any kind of scale is so prohibitive, especially if you need any kind of profit margin, that it's not there yet for me.
Mm-hmm. Colleen, it's not for you either?
It's not. My internal clients would love if it was, but it's not achieving the goal of training our advisors and our managers. So it's not something that we're doing right now at our events. On a very small scale, we do use some VR technology to map out the room. There's a camera called the Matterport that we'll use in a more unique venue.
But you're using it during the planning
process, yeah, but not during the execution. But even that is very far and few between for for that use.
Well, the one thing that I think gets missed most of the time is the R in the AR and VR.
What do you mean?
It's not real, and you can't convince yourself that it is. There's something that's a lot more tangible about a live experience interacting either with technology that's been artfully designed to give you an experience or give a group of people an experience, or a live event that gives you an emotional lift based on its story that's involved. And my experiences with VR and then with AR, I don't get that same thing yet. And I haven't seen everything that's out there, and some people are more successful at it than others. But I would like to see more of the R come into the VR and AR.
I would say that it's probably the D there right now. It's a dimension. There is an augmented dimension, and that's what we're able to achieve with our augmented reality activations. And we've tried to do a great number of them. I mean, we mentioned the augmented reality hunt. We're doing a partnership right now to do outside of Arctic House augmented reality cocktails. Last year for the holiday season with a Nutcracker, we were able to put characters into the phones and people to go discover. I think it was definitely a better way than putting, say, glasses on a child, because they still love their devices and they love their phones. So for them, this becomes more of kind of a gaming element and an interesting way of seeing something in a different dimension, whether it represents the reality or not. It changes the current reality, and there is a way to do that. I think it's interesting to see how it's going to develop, and for us, it's interesting to explore the possibilities of the way that art and storytelling can be a part of using this dimension, a new dimension.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So tell me about how did that exactly work with the drink? How did that work?
So with the AR, there are several ways that it gets activated. It can be activated through beacons. It can be a geo-target location. Geo-target location we did, for example, for Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta when we launched an Arctic House air balloon into the sky. So each person was able to launch in a hot air balloon. People, we've had actually some comments. We did it on the Washington, D.C. in the National Mall, and someone who was from Albuquerque was missing out on the balloon fiesta. Was like, thank you so much for giving me a way to get a balloon up in the sky with the app. For the cocktails, it's an activation through a marker. So that's the third way of activating the AR, is that there has to be a certain type of marker. For us, we use coasters as a marker, or we use an edible wafer paper that goes on top of the cocktail and activates for it to be on the top and be able to float around.
Mm-hmm. So these are all fun things, arguably. Is there a way for you to use this technology to enhance learning?
We've had an experiment with that. We had our exhibit in May was for the International Day of Light. We worked with also the Optical Society Association and a few others on the UNESCO's International Day of Light. We tried to incorporate educational material into the AR. The production times were not matching the deadlines, and the content didn't get, unfortunately, produced in time, and that's because we're trying new things. We're still thinking that it's a possibility in the sense that we want to have an AR content throughout the exhibits that people go and experience, with information that would be able to fed into their devices and tell them stories. It's just that it sounds like something realistic and achievable, but the actual amount of time and production that goes into it is, at this point, is far exceeding than the result.
Mm-hmm. Great. We have a couple more iPad questions, and then we'll have the opportunity for some live Q&A. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and someone will bring you a mic. So I'll turn that over to you while we answer a couple of these more questions. So a lot of people in the room do production for AV production for conferences like AVEC. What's one idea that you could offer to improve the average association conference? Stump the panel. Colleen, do you have any thoughts on that?
Okay, yeah, so I think that's a really good question. So as I walk around the AVEC conference, I can't help but to think, oh, would I have done it that way? Or would I have done it a different way? That's just the nature of my job and who I am. So I think that the thing that we can do with, in regards to audiovisual, is make sure that the room and the equipment in the room is appropriate. And this is, I mean, it's pretty basic, right? But like, is this the right sized screen all the way down to, is the temperature correct in the room? And by keeping it comfortable and appropriate for the audience, hopefully that can help them engage more with their presenters.
Other ideas?
For me, so I did my original study is in the development of fandom in non-commercially successful music groups. What is it about the Grateful Dead that makes people follow them around when they only had one top 10 song of all time? And there's an element of ritual, and there's an element of community that's brought together that, you know, I think we've fallen so much into the formal conference of, you guys sit there, I sit here, you know, you press some buttons and question shows up there, which is very cool, but there's also the ability to actually have community gathering and networking without having to step outside and do your networking time. And now you're back inside, shh, everybody quiet, you're gonna listen to me speak, I'm the authority, boom, you know, rinse, repeat, new session. So I think there's always the ability to actually develop community and break down the traditional bonds of you know, I'm a competitor of this guy, oh, I see this guy every other month at a trade show, and actually make this to be a celebration of what the trade is, and have us all march forth and take over the world, you know, at the end of it.
I think there's across the AV industry as a whole, there's an incredible amount of vanilla in terms of just our diversity, and I what I find uninteresting, and I'm happy on this panel, is a table with 4 or 5 white dudes that look like me up just talking for an hour. So I think if the entire industry realizes that other voices can make us all a little more interesting and expand additional ideas, that to me would enhance any conference like this.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Definitely agree.
Another question. This is for anyone who's traveled extensively, or maybe just surfed on your iPad or website. Your desktop. What do you think is the best projection mapping experience in the world worth seeing right now? At BizBash, we recently wrote about one at the LA Philharmonic, and it was live projections to what was happening on stage, including not only the LA Phil, but Katy Perry was singing, and so then the projections were changing at the Hollywood Bowl. So that was pretty incredible.
I can tell you the famous one. I don't get to travel. I travel a lot, but it's only usually for my own projects. But you know, the Digital Art Museum it's in Paris is supposed to be outstanding. Obviously, our Harry Potter stuff. Yeah. I had nothing to do with that. Oh man, massive projection mapping.
I would like to see the cathedral in Montreal. Is that where it is?
The Aura? Yeah,
yeah,
that's ours.
I haven't been there yet.
Yeah.
That's on the list, though.
That one is like going to church on LSD. Like it really is all of the stuff that you imagine coming alive
on
when
the
you were
list,
7 years
too.
old, sitting in there. Like it's legit. It's has anybody been to it? It's all right. One. And then also our Luminas are awesome. Without LSD. Yeah.
For the
Do not
record.
go on LSD. I'm telling you, it's double dosage. So.
On our end, when we source a lot of artists, I mean, it seems that a lot of those great experiences, they're ephemeral in the sense that they happen and you have to be there to experience them. A lot of, there are a number of festivals in Europe that have projection mapping that is part of that. And there are incredible things that artists or studios or factories that do for those festivals. Unfortunately, they don't live long. It's not a very cost-efficient way of putting it, but there are a lot of beautiful things. I think definitely looking out for a projection mapping festivals and going to check them out is the best. I recently was in Moscow, and end of September they had a beautiful projection on one of their theaters, and then I think there's one coming up in Spain. I think those have a really great kind of new and innovative things that a lot of artists and studios and factories submit things to.
Mm-hmm.
I always like to see the integration of projection mapping with something real. And we experimented with this in our last Disney on Ice production, where we had a bouncing beach ball going across, and then it hits a window, and we threw out the same size beach ball out of that. And that was a nice wow moment for the audiences, and I thought a good use of it as a storytelling element.
I think the best ones don't treat it as a screen. You know, they play into the architecture of what's already there and try to break that reality of it.
Mm-hmm. Colleen, this question is for you. What is the single most important thing you want from your AV provider, aside from equipment and people?
So I would have said people, so thank you for that qualification. Other than equipment and people, we want consistency. And we want to be able to do an event in Tampa, do an event in New York, do an event in LA, and get the same level of service regardless of where we are, and have the same high-level attendee experience regardless of location.
Great. Any other questions from the audience? Submitted by iPad or just shouting them out? No. All right. Well, I wonder, maybe we'll just fit one more question in. Is there a dream project that any of you have been waiting for either the tech to catch up to execute, or something you've been itching to try and you're just waiting for the right client or moment?
I've got one where the technology is almost there, and that's to do full sound spatialization within an arena with 270 degrees of audience. And that's moving the sound on the X, Y, and Z axes for everyone there. So the mapping of the sound of the character or whomever's speaking, the system automatically tracks them and matches and moves the sound based on their location. It's almost there.
We'll look for that soon. Anyone else?
We also have a dynamic projection, or our projection mapping server that we have does dynamic projection mapping, so it can track multiple axes of movement. We never wanted to show that we're actually projection mapping something in movement, so it's one of those that like we really want to do it. It's technically ready, but it's got to be the right environment, the right experience for it.
Interesting. Well, we'll keep our eyes out for that. Meanwhile, help me thank our panel. It's so interesting. Thanks, guys.